Hi, I'm Sunil Badami and you're watching Made in the West TV. Thanks for joining us on Made in the West TV. I'm Sunil Badami and we're with the winners of Made in the West 2019. Vonne Patiag, director of the sweet and eye-opening film Tomgirl, who won the special Spirit of the West Award. Vonne's been a Made in the West finalist for 5 years running, including winning Best in the West in 2015. Emily Buie, winner of the Best Student Film Award for the revealing and inspiring documentary Ankara Pride. Matias Bolla, winner of this year's Best in the West trophy, as well as the Audience Choice Award for his moving and beautiful documentary Campesinos. And we're here talking about their award-winning films. Matias, your film Campesinos was one of my favourites. Beautiful, lyric, haunting. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a documentary about the gauchos of Patagonia, and really I just wanted to try to document their personal lives, and I just wanted to know the answer to the question of whether they get lonely.
So for those of us who don't know what a gaucho or a campesino is, what are they?
Gaucho is a cowboy of Patagonia, a very traditional farming. They do everything by horseback, and they live by themselves, usually in a post in the middle of nowhere, really, quite far from anyone else, and they do it all by themselves. Yeah.
And what about campesino? What does that mean?
So Campesinos came about because I went to do a documentary about the gauchos, but I realized whilst doing it and interviewing them that none of them really referred to themselves as gauchos, even though they knew that they were. They always referred to themselves as campesinos, which really sort of just means farmer, and they just talked about themselves as farmers, just people of the country, which I really liked in particular because they didn't put a label on themselves, because gaucho is often referred to as a big sort of tradition. They didn't put that label on themselves, they just thought of themselves as normal people of the country.
I mean, we often hear a lot about macho culture in Latin America and South America. How did you manage to gain the campesinos' trust and get them to tell and share their stories so honestly and so rawly?
It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. It was something that I knew I was going to have to struggle with. Mainly, like you said, also these people don't really talk to people very often, so it was hard to get them to open up, but they were actually very welcoming people, and really all I did was talk to them like humans, and we just sat down for hours just conversing and sharing a mate, and just in a circle for a long time, just discussing life and everything. And I didn't shoot the interviews until the very, very end, when I knew them and they knew me, and that's how we were able to talk about the deeper things as well.
Now, Emily, I really loved your documentary Ankara Pride. It wasn't just so sweet, so full of energy and so inspiring. I loved seeing all those places I grew up in and around in Blacktown, like the Civic Centre and Kmart. Tell me, what's your film about?
It's about this amazing fashion designer named Blessing. She moved to Sydney when she was around 17 years old, I believe, and she touches on the struggle that she's had to face as someone that has come from like an African background. Just in back then, a very, I guess, not very diverse industry, and she has had a bunch of experience back home, but because it wasn't in Australia, it was kind of nullified, like it didn't count in a sense to people. And so she enrolled into TAFE and she tells us about how there was actually quite a lot of discrimination against her, and that it did put her down a little bit, but she really encourages emerging designers, artists, and just creatives in general to really fight through that, and you'll eventually emerge victorious, which I think is really inspiring.
What similarities do you see between what you do as a filmmaker and what Blessing does as a designer? Of course, I'm thinking studios, cutting room floor. What similarities do you see in the process? Are there any?
I think in general, just for creatives, I think there's definitely a bit of a struggle, whether it's culturally or just whether or not we get enough support from like our families, for example, or our peers. There tends to be a lot of, I guess, negativity when it comes to whether or not it has a lot of earning potential to, let's say, our parents who want the best for us. And I think the commonality that there is that we just have to keep pushing through and keep going, because it's what we love to do, it's what we're proud to do, and it's what we really want to share with the world.
Now, Vonne, Tomgirl was such a lovely film, not only sweet and funny, but deeply moving. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So Tomgirl is a short film about a boy who wants to dress up as a girl because he gets bullied at school and girls don't get hit, apparently. And his uncle reveals himself to be a buckle up performer. So his uncle is just like, you know what, if you want to do this, let's do it together. They Sailor Moon transform into females and hit the streets of Blacktown and celebrate their Filipino culture.
So what is bakla, and how does it fit into the Filipino cultural tradition?
So bakla is the most visible LGBT community in Philippines. It's where men cross-dress as women, and these men aren't necessarily homosexual or heterosexual. The word often gets mistranslated to gay in English, but it's actually more of like a cultural sexuality or cultural identity, which is more born from the actual practice of cross-dressing. It does reveal itself as a third gender within Filipino culture, and it is married to tomboy practice, which is where women cross-dress as men. It definitely is the most visible LGBT culture in Philippines, and if anything, most of our entertainers, most of our comedians are actually buckle up performers. So it actually does have quite a high regard in Philippines as well.
But with a rising tide of conservatism and populism spreading across the globe, particularly anti or homophobic sentiment, and in countries like Australia, the United States, Hungary, and the Philippines, where President Duterte has come out strongly against homosexuality and homosexual people, there seems to be a kind of paradox in the way that bakla is represented in Filipino culture, at once a stigma and a celebration. How did you balance those two demands in Tomgirl?
It's funny you bring up the idea of the paradox, because for me that is intrinsic to being Filipino and Filipino culture. One thing that I really learned reconnecting with my roots is that we're quite a fluid culture. Like, English is very categorical. It says like, this is a man, this is a female, you are this, you are this. Whereas Philippines, everyone's just kind of swimming around doing everything. So, so it is an innately queer culture. And the film Tomgirl was actually commissioned through Create New South Wales and SBS as almost I wouldn't say reaction, but it was during the plebiscite year as well. So there were 6 films commissioned with LGBT skewed stories and filmmakers. And I simply wanted to make a film that actually celebrated the culture, because I felt like at the time it was very common to see a lot of LGBT content that was really dark and dramatic, and like people would be killed for no reason. Looking at the drudgery of LGBT representation, and I simply just wanted to celebrate culture, celebrate Filipino culture, celebrate bakla culture, and that's what I did. So in a weird way, like I think being uniquely specific to bakla culture meant the film could be more universal as a celebration of what it means to be different.
Everybody assumes that the film industry in Australia is, basically in the eastern suburbs or the North Shore, where it's traditionally been, all the TV and film production studios. What opportunities has Made in the West provided for filmmakers and creatives in the West, and how are those kind of perspectives and opportunities changing, Vonne?
I think just having the screening component, so being able to work on films that we shoot in Western Sydney and having them actually screen, it, like you were saying before, like it gives you a bit of confidence as a filmmaker. I'm really big on, as a filmmaker now, like I will say that over the last 5 years I've progressed quite a lot. I'm working on a lot more longer form stuff now, and one thing that I'm always interested in is the film infrastructure and sustainable practice for filmmakers in Western Sydney. Like, what can we do as filmmakers to sort of like create an industry? I actually commissioned Ankara Pride, like I'm the godfather of that film in a weird way. But I worked with Blacktown Arts Centre to develop Blacktown Shorts as a platform for 5 new voices to gain their first like short film experience.
They were also amazing.
They're also, and they were all, these artists were all ready to just like make work. They all had stories that they wanted to say, and we helped them sort of get those films to finish those films, and we had a screening component again as part of that. So just creating more opportunities like that are so important. Like, and in turn, you start to educate councils, you start to educate audiences, you build audiences, and that's how you sort of create the community around film. I think that's what we need more of.
But why is it so important to have these stories told or represented on film?
I think it's really important, mainly because it allows anyone that I guess grew up in Western Sydney or around Western Sydney that it is possible to kind of get your story out there, to have something that feels a lot more, like you can reach out to it more easily, as opposed to trying to break into like the eastern suburbs, which is so far away. And it's just something that, like, knowing there are people in your community that are also striving to achieve similar things as you, it really like gives you like that push in the right direction, and like it really inspires you to actually start making something. Whether or not it's good or bad, that doesn't really matter, as long as you just keep creating, keep thinking of new ideas and new concepts. I think that's what's really important.
I think that's why Made in the West is so important as well. Like, I remember when I first heard that it even existed, I didn't know that it existed.
Yes, I
know.
know.
Yeah. And I went, and I was like, wow, there's a whole film community out here that I didn't even know about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the exciting thing when you start making connections, you start networking.
And it's just, it's so encouraging, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
And also, like, kudos to Misty and Ross. Shout out to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
But I've never felt like I've gone 5 years. Actually, I missed last year. Sorry. Like,
How dare
I've
you.
gone 4 years. And I've never felt that same barrier or like that same gatekeeper status that other film festivals sometimes have. Like, I think like in film, because it is so highly regulated and there's so much business and money involved, like sometimes when you do get invited to do a bigger project or you get invited to a film festival, it's almost like, these things are saying like, welcome to this table. Like, you're very privileged to be here. And I've always felt like Made in the West is so inclusive. Like, no, there's just no judgment at the door. And I think we need more of that sort of inclusive practice in our industry as well.
I mean, we do hear from the very top echelons of arts funding bodies, film funding bodies, government, within the industry, about the need for diversity, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera. I mean, what does diversity mean to you, and how can we improve diversity? Is it just a box-ticking exercise, or can we do something more practical and meaningful to bring more voices into the conversation, more people to the table? Matias?
I think diversity is very important. Like, I think it's just important in the sense that we're telling stories of things that we know, and the audience wants to see stories of things that they know. And something, for example, in Made in the West, like, I just had audience members come up to me and say, like, oh, that film just reminded me of my dad, which I think is what diversity is all about, what making film is all about, that you can touch people. And I think people just want to see pieces of themselves in film as well. And I think that's what's so important about it, and what we're trying to do as well as filmmakers.
Yeah, I remember like when I was in BOFA, another film festival in Launceston, and this producer had just seen my film Window, which I was in and I was naked in, and it was very personal and stuff. But he said to me, like, the power of you telling your story is that, like, when you tell your story with utmost truth, you actually empower other people to realize what truth means for themselves. And I think, like, that is the true power of diversity and authentic representation. It's not, it's about uniquely looking at the stories we have to say and encouraging someone else to be like, you also have a valid story. Like you said, like, it doesn't really, your film doesn't only speak to, Chilean people. It when you're uniquely specific, it goes universal. And I think that's the message, that you are valid as a person.
And it really sparks a conversation as well.
Yes.
It's a really good conversation starter. Just being able to, like, even relate to stories of people that you may not be able to, like, fully understand, like, without the subtitles maybe. But it's just, it really sends a positive message to people that are thinking about possibly, sharing their own stories, but then thinking, I don't know if people are going to be interested. I don't know if I should. And then the idea kind of, like, gets scrapped or like stored away in, like, some kind of basement in their mind. But then once they see a story even remotely similar to theirs being shared and being so well received, I think it really gets a conversation going, and that's really important.
Yeah. And in terms of, like, the box ticking idea,
Oh.
like, sometimes it is. Me personally, I don't like to use the word diversity anymore in terms of, like, I don't like being part of diversity initiatives. I fully support them, but I just think that as an industry, we've kind of moved past that. I'm more focused now on inclusive practice and inclusive process. So I think in times, like, when we talk about diversity, we see it as a product where it's like, which denotes, when you say the word diverse, you're denoting that something is not diverse. So if you say a cast is diverse, there's clearly a white person in that cast, right? Because, like, they're normalizing what diversity means, and then the brown people around them are like, the diversity. I think that we should be moving towards a more inclusive practice and inclusive process, which is where we just listen to what, the culture needs and wants, and as people, we look at stories that demand that the right people tell them. And invite them to the table. And that's regardless of experience and regardless of demographic.
Thank you so much, not just for your wonderful films. I think I cried in each of them as much as laughing as well. Thank you so much for those, and for your amazing insights into the Western Sydney film scene. It's so exciting and so inspiring, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And congratulations on your amazing wins in the 2019 Made in the West Film Festival. Keep an eye out for these guys. I don't think this is the last we'll see of them. It's interesting too, isn't it, that Australia isn't just a collection of sovereign borders or place names or demographics or the GDP. It's an idea. It's a conversation, and one that we can only expand and enrich by listening to all our stories, sharing all our perspectives, and hearing all our voices. It's something I think we need more of, and it's something that Made in the West and filmmakers, talented filmmakers like this, do so well. Thanks so much for joining us on Made in the West TV. If you'd like to find out more about Made in the West Film Festival, you can check out the details online at their website. And hopefully we'll see you on the red carpet next year. I'm Sunil Badami, Westie, born and bred. Thanks for watching.